What is behind the rising tensions across the Taiwan Straits? Why are many people in the island afraid of identifying publicly themselves as Chinese? Why is the separation increasingly seen through the prism of democracy versus authoritarianism? I was joined from Taipei by Lai Yueh-tchienn, a well-known Taiwan-based political scholar, to find out the reasons behind these strange phenomena. I started by asking him to help me understand the cyber violence targeting pro-reunification voices in Taiwan.
There are basically two types of online attacks we're talking about here. First off, we've got what's known as the 1450 Cyber Troll Army. This whole crew was put together by the DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party, using public funds. Yeah, they spread the taxpayers' money around different departments like it's for PR expenses. Now here's the thing. That money was used to set up a massive army of internet trolls, and we've given this army the name 1450. The digits derive from the 14.5 million new Taiwan dollars, which is around 470,000 US dollars. It was exposed that the Taiwan region's department in charge of agriculture allocated 14.5 million in its budget. Everyone caught on that they were bankrolling this internet troll army. There's more. A bunch of other departments are doing similar things, with budgets ranging from millions to even billions of new Taiwan dollars. Basically, they're building their own troll armies. These trolls usually take orders from some higher-ups. The personal attacks you're talking about come from this 1450 group, and they've got their sights set on people who are pro-reunification. The DPP is fronting the cash for these trolls, and they're all about shouting Taiwan independence. Politically, they're against reunification and Cross-Straits integration. They're like the flag bearers of Taiwan independence. They're behind most of those nasty attacks. They basically assume different personas online and drop seriously nasty vitriol towards people. This is typical of online attacks in the Taiwan region. The second group is made up of some young people. They don't really identify themselves as Chinese due to their education, and they're not really on board with reunification. Some of them want to share their different takes, but they tend to keep it cooler and more logical when expressing these different takes. They're not so into personal attacks. Whenever things get wild, with those personal attacks, insults, and even death threats towards people and their families, you can usually pin that on the 1450 group, the paid internet troll army cooked up by the DPP. When talking about online attacks, we need to break it down into two groups. If you're targeted by the 1450 group, you don't have to sweat it too much. They're organized, they systematically sling insults at you while pretending to be someone else. That brings up another issue. It all started with the education reform, messing with the textbooks. They call it education reform. It began in the Chen Shui-bian era. For 8 years, Chen was all about erasing Chinese identity. Then came Ma Ying-jeou's 8 years, and he didn't straighten things out, which adds up to 16 years. And now Tsai Ing-wen has been in power for 7 years. So if you do the math, that's a grand total of 23 years. 23 years of chipping away at our sense of being Chinese. What they've been consistently driving at is this: we're not Chinese, we're Austronesian. Over those 23 years, from elementary school straight through to college. Imagine someone who was in junior high school 23 years ago. They were 15 years old then, so now they're 38. Or someone who started college at 18. They'd be in their 40s now. For anyone under their 40s, and the young folks born recently in the Taiwan region, their sense of identity has been muddled. They no longer consider themselves Chinese. This is because the history textbooks, from elementary to high school, and even in college, have stripped away their Chinese identity. It's created a real conundrum about how people see themselves.
认同上的一个困难。
所以，当有人去提醒，或者说去这个提亮他们的这个中国的这个根，或者说提倡大家再一次去捡回那个中华的民族文化的那个根的时候，他们就会来受到这样的攻击和批评。
是的，当你说
Absolutely. The moment you say you're Chinese, you'll be attacked. When you claim to be a member of the Chinese nation, you'll be criticized.
受到批评，
现在在台湾的这个民众当中，有多少人是真正的支持？有没有存在一个沉默的大多数，或者说很多人他不敢说他支持统一，或者他是中国人？
目前来说，肯站出来说他是中国人。
Currently, I think there are very few who dare to stand up and say they're Chinese in the Taiwan region. Given the current atmosphere, everyone follows the crowd. With the current atmosphere, the moment you say you're Chinese, they think you're tied to the mainland. Many young folks wouldn't admit it at school. They wouldn't say, I'm Chinese. A considerable number would say, I'm Taiwanese. Around 30%, even 40% would agree, I'm both Taiwanese and Chinese. If you state both identities, they'd feel comfortable saying, I'm Taiwanese and I'm also Chinese. However, there is also definitely around 30 to 40% who believe I'm Taiwanese, not Chinese.
有3、4成。好，那您从这个角度来推敲，那也就是只要他肯承认。
If we look at it this way, at least 30% of young people are willing to admit they're Chinese, no matter if they also say they're Taiwanese.
那其他的不表达意见
For the rest who don't express an opinion, the silent ones you mentioned, why don't they express their stance? If they just say, I'm Taiwanese, isn't that easier? Why are they hesitating to even say, I'm Taiwanese? That could mean that a significant portion of them only believe they're Chinese and not Taiwanese.
他就是只承认他是中国人。
现在就是支持和融合的、支持两岸融合的人会被称为统战。他为什么用这个词？他用这个词想在民众中引起一种什么样的情绪或者想象？
其实统战应该讲就是那个 unification 吧，那也就是说是整合成为一体化的这样的一个。
I guess Tongjian can be translated as reunification. It means becoming a unified entity. During the development of the Communist Party of China, Tongzhan, or United Front, was one of their 3 magic weapons in winning their battles. It's about uniting the majority. It's like a different flavor of democracy. In regular democratic politics, the majority has the final say, but you still have to give some respect to the minority. The twist, though, is that in democratic politics, the big group tends to ignore the little guys. The majority might not outright persecute the minority, but they won't give their ideas much weight. Think about the United States, for instance. When the Republicans get the upper hand in elections, they often tune out the Democrats. Similarly, when the Democrats take control, they dismiss what the Republicans have to say. This is about forming a united front, trying to scoop up as many votes as possible.
声音就会去忽视它。同样的道理，现在的民主党多数取得政权，他对于共和党的声音就会尽量的。
The original idea of Tongjian is more or less like gathering the crowd to stand beside me. From a democratic angle, you could also say it's getting the majority on my side. In the context of the Chinese mainland, the deal is to get as many people on board with reunification as possible. The challenge right now is that in the Taiwan region, people backing reunification aren't really the majority. So, from the mainland's perspective, they're hoping to slowly grow the support in the Taiwan region. To make this happen, the mainland engages in activities and exchanges with Taiwan, striving to gain more recognition for Chinese mainland or a shared Chinese identity. This way, the support base expands.
进行很多的这些活动交流，然后来争取更多的人去认同中国大陆，或是认同我们都是中国人。
If they manage to have more supporters than the ones hollering for Taiwan independence, the mainland scores an advantage, and things naturally come together between the two sides. That's the game plan of Tongzhan. But don't forget, it's not about fighting or using force. It's another kind of democracy, where it's all about convincing, persuading, and exchanging ideas. It's a different way of doing politics, democratic style. Now the DPP fear this type of democracy. They're worried because it's about exchanging, sharing ideas, maybe giving in a bit to create a friendlier environment for development for people in certain places, winning more hearts. This is Tongzhan. You can also call it a form of democracy, a form of integration. It's a slow and gradual process.
那这个其实也就是一种民主，你也可以把它说成为一种统战，你也可以把它说成为一种融合。
The DPP's biggest worry is that this Tongzhan approach will gain more and more support over time. They're seriously on edge about it. Look at Lai Yueh-tchienn, who didn't even bring up Taiwan independence this time when he was in the US. That's because he knows shouting Taiwan independence could stir up trouble. Most people in Taiwan are against war, so now he's saying he's against Taiwan independence. This has subdued those who are pro-Taiwan independence. As a result, the real deal with Taiwan independence is that it's got less than 30% backing, even though Tsai Ing-wen has been talking it up outside. She's been saying Taiwan people are all about Taiwan independence by nature, but that's just lying.
那这个其实就告诉大家，蔡英文在说谎。
很多西方媒体啊，他们说，你看，很多年轻人不认同大陆或者不支持统一，所以呢，大陆的这个统一的这个理想也好，这种目标也好，是不合理的，或者说是不现实的，而且从大陆来统一台湾有一种所谓的专制压倒民主的这样的一个话语，您怎么来看他们对这个事件的这种阐述？
因为我是学政治学专业的啊，几千年前在希腊，就是雅典，其实就有两个体制的战争。
I studied political science. Thousands of years ago in Greece, in Athens, there were two systems in conflict. One was the so-called democratic system in Athens, and the other was the so-called authoritarian system in Sparta. In ancient Greece, philosophers from Socrates and Plato to Aristotle realized that Athens' so-called democratic system wasn't really a good system. It wasn't good because it was both ineffective and inefficient in governing, and though it offered a broad sense of freedom, it couldn't bring greater happiness to the people. This democratic system is inefficient in governance. It bends to the interests of political families, widening the wealth gap and creating social injustice. The further the system goes, the more these issues are exacerbated.
事实上是很明显的，这套系统在今天我们看到越走下去，它越成为现实。而另外一套制度就是所谓的专制集权的制度。
On the other hand, there is the so-called authoritarian centralized system. In the Chinese mainland, the system has taken on a different aspect. This aspect is that power is highly centralized. That's true. But this high concentration of power is constrained, and its constraint is self-imposed. It's what we call anti-corruption, something that's never happened in human history before. It's self-imposed. China has had a strict supervisory system dating back to the Qin dynasty. But the current anti-corruption drive is stronger than any supervisory system that China had for thousands of years under emperors. This form of self-reflection and self-purification is like putting power in a cage. This has never existed in the experience of Western countries. That's the first thing. For thousands of years, China's politics was about emperors and kings. Instead now, it's the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China that selects a leader. And as we all know, power is decentralized. It's restricted.
然后大家都知道，权力是分散的，是被限制住的。好， 可是问题就是这套权力高度集中的时候，它却使一个贫穷落后的国家
Under the system, with highly centralized power, it has guided a poor and backward country to strive towards becoming a wealthy nation in such a short time. In this process, it's doing things that no democratic country would dare to imagine, let alone do, like bringing the benefits of development to impoverished regions, like what we call achieving a moderately prosperous society. And China has achieved what Western countries could never imagine, bringing public goods like electricity, running water, and transportation infrastructure to remote areas. These are things that capitalist countries couldn't even conceive of, but they've all happened in the Chinese mainland. But here's the issue. If this system continues in the same way and Chinese people become more and more prosperous, what if the average per capita disposable income in China reaches 50,000 US dollars? What kind of nation would that be? It's hard for them to imagine, and they don't even dare to imagine it. So, they want to stir up conflict between the two sides to hinder China's progress towards 30,000 to 50,000 US dollars average per capita disposable income. The Taiwan region is a good pawn for this.
大陆发展比较慢，当台湾在创造所谓的四小龙经济奇迹的时候，大陆在过去那30年的折腾。
But the thing is, the Taiwan region and the mainland, because initially the Taiwan region developed faster and the mainland developed slower, during the 30 years when the Taiwan region was undergoing its so-called Four Asian Tigers economic miracle, the mainland was undergoing turmoil. It emerged from that turmoil and entered Deng Xiaoping's era of reform and opening up. The gap in economic development and material wealth brought gaps in cultural aspects of the society. Taiwan region's young people have developed a stereotype to overlook the Chinese mainland when they travel. They go to the Republic of Korea, Japan, the United States, Europe, Southeast Asia, but they ignore the Chinese mainland. A large number of the Taiwan region's young people are unaware of the Chinese mainland's successful development. Now those who have been to the mainland, especially those who have studied, done business, live there, ended up staying there, and fewer come back. The more the Taiwan region's young people go to the mainland, their attitudes change, and their stance on not considering themselves Chinese fundamentally changes. In fact, Europe and the United States are worried about this happening.
这个情况会根本性的改变。其实欧美他们就担心这个事情发生。
到底是什么造成了台湾问题？台湾问题归根结底是什么问题？是什么原因造成的？岛内岛外的因素到底各占几层吧？
我觉得内战，而中国过去在内战败的那一方，他基本上就会。
It boils down to the Civil War. Chiang Kai-shek's refusal to accept defeat dragged the conflict on, involving external forces like the US and Japan. The Civil War lasted too long, and the Taiwan region hasn't had any real interaction with the mainland for too long. This isolated the Taiwan region from the mainland and worsened by the US, which knows full well that it can use the Taiwan region for bargaining.
来向中国大陆讨价还价，在过去，美国曾经成功过，也就是大概在2005年吧。当时美国
In the past, the U.S. successfully used the Taiwan region as leverage, like in 2005, when the Democratic Progressive Party led by Chen Shui-bian advocated independence. This put immense pressure on the Chinese leaders, who needed to address this, but couldn't, given the military and economic limitations. Hence, the U.S. stepped in, but at what cost?
可是交换什么？中国损失非常的惨重，西方人得到巨大的利益。
China suffered great losses, while the West gained. Clearly, they didn't want Cross-Straits reunification. The Taiwan region was a useful card, and only now they're facing resistance. President Xi Jinping won't let history repeat itself from 2005, so they keep escalating the Taiwan question even to the edge of war, hoping to pressure the mainland into concessions.
那问题就在于，我觉得美国它的
I believe the U.S.'s attempt to use the Taiwan card won't succeed, but the Democratic Progressive Party is collaborating with the U.S. in this effort. This mix of internal, external, and historical factors make the current Cross-Straits situation complex. However, I'm not too pessimistic about the future. As the Chinese mainland's development continues, when the people of the Taiwan region see the development of the mainland, their views will evolve.
迟早很多的想法会改变。